I'm kind of in a state of disbelief. I got the news about Terry Pratchett's death when I was at work today. One of my friends sent me a message, and I don't think it's quite sunk in yet. It's a really difficult thing for me to come to terms with, and I'm still in a kind of a state of shock, I suppose, or just a feeling of disbelief. I'm making this video more for myself than for anyone else because I don't know, I just feel weirdly shaken by it, and I just want to speak. I want to talk about my own experiences and my feelings, and the best way to do that for me right now is just to sit in front of a camera and just project it all there, regardless of whether you guys care or not. I want to say it. I'm making this video for me. I've been a really big Terry Pratchett fan for pretty much my entire life. I mean, I'm going back to, it was primary school, and it was maybe year 4 or 5, maybe 5, yeah, I don't remember the year names anymore, when I first started reading Terry Pratchett's books. I can still remember, we were going on a family holiday, me and my family, and I went to Asda, and they asked me to choose a book, and I was kind of browsing all the different choices, and I saw The Colour of Magic. They just had some of the older Terry Pratchett books there. And I looked at it and thought, this looks cool. I mean, the cover art was always one of the really big appeals of those books back then, especially if you're a kid. You want things that have good cover art on them, things that look, eye-catching. And so I was drawn in. And so I picked up The Colour of Magic, and I read the back, and I read it was about this wizard, Rincewind, and I thought it sounded cool. And so that was my holiday book. And it's quite interesting that I should start with the number one, the first one, back in 1984 or something, 2 years before I was born, that book was written. And there must have been something that really clicked with me, that really sparked my imagination, because that was the start of a very long relationship with Terry Pratchett's work. I went on, as soon as I finished The Colour of Magic, I read The Light Fantastic, and I just built momentum. And I've just been into those books ever since. I love The Colour of Magic. It's your introduction to Rincewind, and Rincewind is such an amazing, likeable character. This incompetent wizard that seems to be like a cat in that he always lands on his feet. He gets in some ridiculous, dangerous scenarios, and through incompetence, he seems to survive and scrape his way through. And I think that all of us can sometimes empathise with Rincewind, kind of feeling like we bumble through life and seem to be able to just scrape by on luck and maybe a bit of charisma. And it just became a really big part of my life. I used to buy the books as regularly as I could. I would just churn through them. I'd read them all the time at school. It's funny, I guess I would call myself a fan of books and reading when I was younger, but actually I was just a fan of Terry Pratchett. I didn't really read anything else. That was reading for me. That was all I read. All the books that I owned, all the books that I spent my time with were pretty much Terry Pratchett's and the Discworld. And there were so many of them that I would never run out. There was never not something to read in there. And the characters were just superb. I mean, death is such a great highlight, and the way that Terry Pratchett addressed mortality through death. Death is such a kind of funny character, and it's just added humour to something that often people consider very bleak. And Terry Pratchett had that way with words, that way of laughing at life's difficult things, that way of making fun of the way that everything is, that was really refreshing. He had such an insight into the way the world worked, and his turns of phrase and the humour would just catch me off guard. And the books were absolutely hilarious. I mean, actually, at such a young age, some of the jokes may have been lost on me, but I still found enough in there to enjoy. Going back as an adult, there was a depth there, and an imagination, and a level of humour and incisiveness that maybe I missed a bit when I was a kid, but I could appreciate a lot more as an adult. And there's so much wit and metaphor and just hilarity in there. It's very rare that a book would catch me off guard enough to make me laugh out loud. And yet Terry Pratchett managed it regularly. Excuse me. He just seemed to manage it regularly. Just that way of describing things. The characters were clearly based. I always felt like they were based on people that he'd met, especially the witches, who are some of my favourites. You know, they were almost like grandmas. They had that believability about them. The ways that they talked about headology and all these different things were just so unique and hilarious, and they just reminded me of like drunken grandmas, slightly saucy grandmas, I suppose. I'm just thinking of Nanny Og now. And that concept of actually a lot of the witchcraft was actually just about being quite a shrewd, sensible, and mature old lady in that way that grandmas can be. They just know a lot of stuff about the world and have a lot of common sense. That was really unique. That was such a great approach to the whole witchcraft thing. They were actually just kind of grandmas, and they used magic here and there selectively, but mostly it was that common sense and that knowledge about things, and that just captured my attention as well. I really loved reading all of the books that involved the witches, but just, yeah, all of the different characters really came to life, and it inspired me a lot to write when I was younger. I used to love writing stories and got into fantasy, and it was really Terry Pratchett that did that for me. It's strange, but it's been something that's always been a staple. It's always been there. Each year, for as long as I can remember, there's been a new book at Christmas time, and I'd always get the new book at Christmas from my mum or from a relative. And that's been the case for a long time. And it's such a strange thought to think that next year there won't be one, that there won't be any more of that. A little bit of my youth, a bit of my childhood, a bit of that security has kind of died. That's one of the things that makes me feel most anxious about growing up. It's losing that childishness, that safety from when I was younger, and actually a lot of that was synonymous with fiction, with Terry Pratchett's books. You know, I used to spend a lot of time at my grandma's house, and when I wasn't playing Game Boy there, I'd be reading Terry Pratchett, and we'd go down to an old bookshop, a second-hand bookshop on Beach Road together, and I'd pick out the Terry Pratchett books that I could find. And all of it's just tied in with my youth and with being young, and as the books kept coming out into adulthood, it was again a way of reminiscing and staying stuck in the past and keeping in touch with who I used to be. And these books just tie in with who I am as a person. I've taken this collection everywhere with me, and it's really such a weird disconnect now to be like, I'm getting old enough now into my life that these people are starting to die. And it makes me feel sad, and it makes me feel kind of vulnerable. And I just don't like it. You know, Bruce Dickinson from Iron Maiden has just been treated for tongue cancer, and that's a very curative cancer, and he's going to be fine. But again, these people have had such a big impact on my life and shaped who I am as a person. And the thought of them being vulnerable or being mortal hurts, and I don't like it. When Iron Maiden finally die or disband or hang up their guitars, I'm going to be an absolute mess, possibly even more so than I have been over the death of Terry Pratchett. But I won't go off on a big Iron Maiden tangent. This is about Terry Pratchett, really. I've got a pretty big collection. I've got a lot of hardback first editions here, and I hope to keep them in good condition wherever I go, and to keep them with me, and to take care of them. And I'm not going to sell them. They may become valuable in the future, but I'll pass them on to my children and keep them in the family. This is something that shaped me, and an author who's really inspired me. I think that I knew that he had Alzheimer's, and I knew that was there in the background, but for some reason I just thought it won't be a big deal. It won't get him. It won't kill him young. It will take time, and he's only 66. He's far too young to die. But he did a lot of good came out of that as well. A lot of awareness was raised about Alzheimer's disease. It was in a very interesting documentary which I watched about Alzheimer's, and I think we need to raise awareness about these issues. It's something that could affect us all. And actually, personally, one of my grandmas passed away from Alzheimer's disease about a year and a half ago, and my other nana has got relatively early stages of it. It's such an upsetting illness that takes away bits of your mind, bits of your cognitive process slowly, but it chips away at it. And it's such a sad illness to witness, to be a part of, to see people that you love changing, and the way that they think, their personality's changing. And that's something that I'm really afraid of happening to my grandma too, and that scares me to think about how that could end up. I don't want to end this too sadly. I want to just say that Terry Pratchett was an amazing, inspiring person who really has influenced who I am in so many different ways. His books, his humour, his characters, and the Discworld, that story, took me away to somewhere else, away from the nitty-gritty of life, away from the depressive parts of it, away from the crap, and transplanted me and took me somewhere, transported me somewhere new and funny and different, and it was just escapism, and it was fantastic. And part of my own abilities, I'm quite good at English and writing. I think those were all thanks to Terry Pratchett, thanks to that start that I had reading his stuff. And the world is truly going to miss one of its greatest, most inspirational, most fantastic authors. And I'd be interested to hear your own thoughts on this, guys. And maybe when I'm a little bit less sad, we can talk some more about my favourite books, and maybe I'll do a bit of a collab video or a community question. But at the moment, I just want to say I'm really sad by this news, and I'm thinking about Terry Pratchett's family, and I just sort of miss him, even though I don't know him. I kind of miss him, and the influence that he's had on my life over the years has been, it's been big. I don't want to understate it. It's been there. It's been a constant. Thanks for watching, guys. Take care.